Congratulate yourself, because you've just made the best decision you're likely to make all day. You've tuned into the voice of reason with Tugboat Calhoun. Tugboat answers your questions and brings you the news that you need to know, because Tugboat knows better than you. And now, here's Tugboat.
Toot toot. Tugboat Calhoun here, towing in an emergency broadcast! No, it has nothing to do with the FBI, the NBI, the NWO, or the NWA. Are they still around? Haven't heard from those guys in a while. Anyway, Tuggernauts, werewolves. That's right, I have come back to the air to warn you about werewolves and other autumn safety topics. There are those among you who I know are very, very busy. Titans of industry, you've got a lot to do. And you're probably saying, hey Tugboat, can you get to the autumn safety tips instead of telling us about werewolves? Well, you know what, Mr. Big Shot, you know, people like you really make the world a terrible place to live in. But I'm under contractual obligation, and I know that you're really busy. You're really big, and you get a lot of important things to do with your day. So, you know what? I am going to get to the autumn safety tips first, but then, Tuggernauts, those of you who are truly committed to the cause, I will be back after the autumn safety tips to give you some werewolf safety tips. I know you're all curious as to where I've been, however, you'll have to mind your own beeswax for meow, and later, maybe next week, maybe the week after, I'll get around to answering that. But right now, hold on, let me close up my Bath & Body Works shopping list. And autumn safety tips. There are some fire safety tips for fall you should be aware of. This as written by Kate Miller-Wilson. There's a hyphen in the name, so it appears she has two last names, which makes her twice as good as the rest of us. I've been thinking of hyphenating my surname, making me as powerful as the 1%ers with two surnames themselves. I don't know if I should go with Rockefeller or Rothschild. I think the Rothschilds are more invested in banking and in funding both sides of wars. Without too many big wars going on right now, I think the Rockefellers in their industry would probably be the best bet. But I guess we'll see. I'm like the changing leaves of autumn. I change sides. Not in my sexuality. So Kate, with the multiple last names, writes, fire safety tips for fall. When the weather turns cold, most people spend more time inside their homes using fireplaces, furnaces, furnace-I, true plural, and heaters to keep warm. There's nothing quite as cozy as a fire, but it presents some safety hazards. Keep these tips in mind. Service your furnace. Not a sexual reference. Not yet, anyway. Before the cold autumn and winter season sets in, be sure to call your heating and cooling company. I don't know why I'd call a cooling company. The furnace heats the house, Kate. Some people, even if they have multiple last names. Anyway, a specialist at the heating company should inspect the furnace to make sure everything is in good working order and there are no leaks. Use fireplaces safely. Keep that fire in its proper place by using a fireplace screen to keep sparks from flying out of the fireplace. Never leave a burning fire unattended, even while making love. You should stop the burning fires of passion, extinguish the fire, and then go extinguish your lover. Make sure that the fire is completely put out before going to bed. Use caution with space heaters, especially in Department of Defense buildings where they are prohibited. A space heater can be an effective way to warm up a chilly room, but it's essential that you read the instructions on the unit before you use it. If your space heater requires venting, make sure you have a vent. Well, no, just don't use a space heater that requires venting. That's very, very pre-modern era. I wouldn't recommend it. Although some people don't have an option, in which case you may want to go to this website where I found these tips and finish reading that tip. But I'm just going to tell you not to do it. Reconsider leaf burning. The CDC reports that burning leaf... You know what? The CDC has no problem letting in diseased immigrants who have tuberculosis and measles. That's okay, but burning leaves, that's a f***ing red light. But, hey, diseased immigrants, come on through, guys. We're going to just send you to all these various cities so that there's no big concentration of you. Make sure we spread the disease around. The CDC, though, has a problem with you burning leaves. You know what? Tugboat Calhoun has a problem with you burning leaves, not for the reason that the CDC does, but because it destroys salamander habitat. So if you burn your leaves, you are essentially a speciecidal maniac who has something against salamanders. You're an anti-salamite if you burn your leaves. Beyond not wanting to be an anti-salamite, you could also start a fire, so make sure that you're safe. You could wear a protective mask, and you should also have a hose handy. Hose, H-O-S-E. The other type of hose, plural for hoe, I suppose, but, check with your local wife before proceeding. You should not burn leaves under windy conditions. Exercise candle caution. Candles are a great way to give a room a warm glow. Right now, here in the WDCK Dick Radio studios, we have a vanilla lavender candle from the Bath & Body Works burning. Tomorrow only, tomorrow being the 31st of October, tomorrow only, online only, you can get a great wintertime scent, the Fresh Balsam. Free with any order, and also you have free shipping with any order $40 or more from the Bath & Body Works. Tomorrow only, well, 31st only, because when you hear this will probably be the day of the sale, and online only, so check out the Bath & Body Works. The National Candle Association reports that almost 10,000 home fires start with improper candle use every year. Never leave candles burning. Again, the physical candle, not the candle of desire for your lover or lovers. That flame should never be extinguished if you want to live a full and fulfilling life. But be sure to put the physical candles out before you go to sleep or leave the room. Also, keep candles away from pets, and some birds can be killed by the scent in some of the in some candles. Not the premier top-of-the-line candles sold by Bath & Body Works, but some of the cheap imitation ones actually can kill your bird. Again, not a sexual reference, the actual animal with the wings and the beak and the crackers and whatnot. Crackers in the sense of hardtack, water, wheat, salt, not a racial slur. Change smoke alarm batteries. Change the batteries in your smoke alarms and carbon monoxide detectors, whether or not you believe the gas actually exists, when you turn back your clocks for daylight savings time. Be certain to check the alarms with the new batteries installed. Check and replace any home fire extinguishers that have expired. Well, we're running a little long here, and I have lots of werewolf safety tips, so I'm going to run through the rest of these. Be aware for poor visibility. Watch for children while driving. Slow down on wet pavement. Wet leaves can be slick. Be prepared for bright sunlight. Watch out for ice. Be careful while pruning trees in order to prevent cutting down a branch, which will hit an electrical line, which could electrocute you, and worse off, upset your neighbors who now have no electricity. Use caution on ladders and clean up fallen leaves, as they can be slick. Be sure that they are equally strewn about the yard. That way there's plenty of room for salamanders to scamper around underneath, catch bugs underneath, and make salamander love underneath, because without salamander love, there are no salamander eggs and no salamanders. On to the more important topics. There's a 4-step plan to staying safe from werewolves. Step 1, identify. Step 2, protect. Step 3, kill the werewolf. Step 4, cure yourself. The best way to avoid being near a werewolf after it transforms is to know who they are in human form. Luckily, there are a couple ways of telling if someone is a werewolf or not. If a person sleeps through the day during a full moon, they may be a werewolf, or chronically unemployed and a former Bernie Sanders supporter. A person may be a werewolf if their 3 middle fingers are the same length. If they have hairy palms, they may also be a werewolf, or they may have discovered some of the dirty websites on the internet at a relatively young age. The next step, other than fatigue, is blindness, so keep that in mind out there, Tuggernauts. There are stories of werewolves having something called the Devil's Mark on them. Funny thing about the Devil's Mark is I am currently infected with ringworm, and Miss Sophia, my secretary and mistress, who is right now 8 months pregnant with my love child, Well, she spotted the ringworm on me and now is holed up in the opposite end of the Calhoun compound here at WDCK Dick Radio Studios, thinking that I now have the werewolf's devil mark, but it's just ringworm. I'm not treating it, not out of any sort of religious belief that faith will heal it, but mostly I'm hoping that it progresses to a certain point where I'm debilitated, thus increasing my government disability payments. Anyway, the devil's mark is usually something that is hidden under clothing, so you may have to be close and personal to check for this one. So that's step one, is identifying the human form of the werewolf. Number two is protecting yourself. Everyone knows that unlike an intelligent vampire, bound by rules like invitation into houses, a werewolf is a primal animal. It'll tear down walls if it must feed. However, you can use this primitive nature to your advantage by not giving a werewolf the ability to get close to you. It will always go after easy prey before it'll pick your house and demand entrance. Stay inside during a full moon, lock your doors and windows, and have your weapons ready. I would also recommend a number of defensive measures: moats, drawbridge, tame dragons trained to the defense of the household, catapults, pitch, the slimy black stuff that you can pour on someone and then light them on fire, kind of like primitive napalm. So you may be devoured by a werewolf, or kind of like a zombie, which obviously, we're being realistic here. We're not going to start talking about zombies on a real serious podcast like The Voice of Reason with Tugboat Calhoun. But you may be bitten and not die, and perhaps turn into a werewolf yourself. There are other ways to unknowingly turn into a werewolf. Obviously, if a werewolf bites you and you survive, there's a good chance you'll become a werewolf also. However, drinking rainwater collected from inside a werewolf's paw print on the ground is an equally effective method of turning into a nasty werewolf. So if you are going to drink water from a paw print on the ground, stick to deer, moose, rabbit, raccoon. Definitely stay away from wolf. And, just dog, bobcat. You might not be able to tell. Maybe you weren't a Boy Scout. So just stick to something that doesn't look in any way canine. When it comes to protecting yourself, kind of on that step 2, rehashing the steps, kind of an interim review here. Step 1, identify. Step 2, protect. Both werewolves and slugs hate salt. Slugs and snails don't like salt because of osmosis, which basically means the salt sucks the water out of their bodies, and they die. Werewolves avoid salt for a more general reason, as salt is a cure-all preventative measure against many different kinds of supernatural and paranormal entities. So if you've got an evil spirit bothering you, or perhaps you suspect your neighbor may be a werewolf, spread some salt around the outside of your house. Maybe keep a small packet of it with you. You never know. You could hit up your local fast food establishment and get a batch of unsalted fries, which could be because the drive-through window is that's sexist. The human at the drive-through window might not be human at all. It may be a werewolf, and they were avoiding putting salt on the fries because it would affect them in their human form. So you can use it to salt your fries or to salt the human in the drive-through window. That would, I guess, technically be assault. However, I believe there are different courts that deal with matters of the supernatural and paranormal. At least that's what I'm hoping. Otherwise, I may be facing some significant jail time coming up here at Tuggernos, but more on that later. Dashing back, if we could for just a moment, to the very first of our anti-werewolf diatribe, there are some additional signs that you can look for identifying werewolves. Someone who has overpowering anger, a unibrow, and also is hydrophobic. Has nothing to do with Bruce Jenner or his sister Caitlyn, but that is a fear of water. Also poor vision, dry tongue, and nighttime walkabouts, or walkaboots, depending on how you speak English. Trouble pronouncing the letter W. Okay, it looks like two V's next to each other. I can see it. It's clear to me, but W. Oh, you know what? A, B, C, D, F, G, H, I, J, K, L, M, N, P, Q, R, S, T, U, V. The one between V and X. The letter between V and X. If you have trouble pronouncing it, you could be a werewolf. Make sure, though, that you don't get your supernatural paranormal creatures mixed up. Salt is going to work on werewolves, however, vampires aren't really going to be affected by it. So there are some things, though, that are very good at keeping werewolves away. Mistletoe, wolfsbane, wreaths made of sage, silver, debatable, but perhaps it could work. But holy water crosses, not going to do you any good in the event of a werewolf. And one last true historical fact, werewolves also existed in ancient Greece. All this talk of werewolves is upsetting my little dog Javaho. He's whining in the background. I hope that you can't hear it. I want the only whining you hear to be mine. Rumor has it that in ancient Greece, King Laocoon, a very ruthless king, may have been the progenitor of werewolves, which I suppose is in contrast to Fenrir, the werewolf king of Norseland. Zeus tried to put an end to Laocoon's tyranny, but the mortal doubted that the being he was talking to was a true god. The king responded by serving Zeus a feast of human flesh, and tried to turn him into a cannibal. For his terrible misdeeds, Zeus transformed King Laocoon into a wolf. Well, that's kind of a anticlimactic story. Kind of like most of the stories that I begin reading on the air, live, pre-recorded, without having done any kind of background check on them. You see a headline, and you're like, whoa, Greek werewolf king, and then you read it, and it's just some a-hole that was trying to turn Zeus into a cannibal, and he got turned into a wolf himself. Doesn't talk about him being a werewolf, or going back and forth between being a king and a werewolf. So again, the Greeks have let us down. Not economically or martially, that is to say in warfare, but their storytelling. The storytelling and olives are really all they got over there, and the storytelling is kind of wearing off, so hopefully that indicates a higher quality of olives, but I'll be the judge of that once I get that higher ringworm disability, because who can afford olives on basic disability? On to the third of the 4 steps in werewolf protection. Ways to kill a werewolf. Number 1, a surefire way to kill a werewolf is a silver bullet. Silver is the key, though. It really can be anything made out of silver, but if it's a knife, you got to get up close and personal, and you'll likely be overpowered by the werewolf, whereas the bullet is the true man's weapon, because you can kill the damn werewolf from hundreds of yards away. There are, as we discussed, mistletoe and sage, which will keep werewolves at bay, but it's not going to kill them. Also, for legal reasons, I have to advise you not to shoot any wolf, half-wolf person you suspect of being a werewolf with a silver bullet or a lead bullet or a copper bullet. Well, I believe that a silver bullet is a name for a particular brand of beer, so I guess you could try getting the werewolf drunk. And if you have been transformed into a werewolf yourself, there are multiple potions that you can buy from traveling people. I'm not allowed to say any longer. It's apparently a racial slur, so I have to say traveling people. Wolfsbane is really the only thing to... And there's once you've become a werewolf, you can only use monk's hood, which, again, not a sexual reference. It is an herb. And that's the only way you're going to cure it. However, it's easier to stop the transformation, in which case you will need wolfsbane, which is much more, if you've been to the apothecary, you know that wolfsbane is very prevalent, easy to get. So using that during the next full moon after you've been bitten is the best way to stop the transformation. However, if you can't do that in time, you're going to need the monk's hood, which is quite expensive. And again, it's going to be difficult to afford on the standard disability payment. Well, Targonauts, this emergency broadcast is drawing to an end. If you have any questions you'd like me to answer on a future emergency broadcast or on the regularly scheduled broadcast, I don't believe I've produced a program in months, if not years. However, every Monday there's supposed to be a new one. Anyway, if you want me to answer a question on one of those, you can email, well, actually on either version of the program, regularly scheduled or emergency. Wow, I'm going on without giving you the information that you want. It's terrible when people keep you in suspense like that. Anyway, if you would like, you can email me at toottoot@tugboatcalhoun.com with your questions, commentary, hate mail. I'd prefer the questions and commentary, as I get about 3-to-1 hate mail versus actual things I can answer on the program for you. You can also visit the website, tugboatcalhoun.com. You can find me on Facebook, you can find me on Twitter, on JDate, on Tinder, Grindr, farmersonly.com. You can download the podcast directly from the website, or you can find us on any reputable podcast directory, Blueberry, TuneIn Radio, iTunes, the Android podcast store. Any podcast market is going to have Tugboat Calhoun. Anyway, Tugnauts, thanks for listening. Remember to always wipe front to back. I'm Tugboat Calhoun, and nobody loves you like I do.